Welcome to The Pulse. In today's episode, we address the question, how do you handle conflict? This is a common question in interviews, though perhaps not in all interviews. However, when we surveyed our community, we discovered that this was one of the most common questions that gives people difficulty. So what we've decided is to break down that question for you and help you come up with a good constructive answer that won't make you nervous or catch you off guard in your interview. How do you handle conflict is the question of the day. Have you guys gotten this question in job interviews before?
Once or twice, I think I have.
I don't think I've ever gotten that one.
Nice. Nice, because this is a hard one to answer. Okay, without having gotten that question before, on the spot, I'm going to ask you right now, how do you handle conflict? Exactly.
I would try and work it out calmly and professionally with the other person. And if I feel that that can't be done, I would then go to a manager and try and get their help with working out the conflict.
You've never been asked that question before, really?
No.
You just like bust up with the best answer, man. That was incredible. Erin, what are your thoughts on this question? How do you handle conflict?
Well, it kind of depends on what kind of conflict it is, whether it's like physical or verbal, or maybe you're witnessing it between colleagues and you're an outsider.
Hmm.
So it depends on the situation too, because it's a little hard to really narrow down an answer without maybe like a specific situation. Like
Right.
maybe you're seeing a couple colleagues, they're arguing, or there's some sort of situation going on. Maybe you just have to kind of maybe perhaps observe the situation for a moment, try to get a feel of what's going on, maybe then try to either step in or get a superior to help out. That's one possible situation. In terms of maybe it's myself and another person, again, it depends on, is it a physical situation, is it a verbal situation, or maybe again, maybe it's like an argument with a colleague, and maybe when you're out drinking with friends or something and you just need to like vent the situation, because sometimes it helps having an outsider view on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really complex to really give a definite answer for.
But that was great. And I think what I liked there, and I hadn't thought about this before, I don't know if you had, Caleb, but being involved in conflict as an outsider or witness, I hadn't ever really thought about that. So Erin, I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because you never know. Like, have you ever had someone vent to you about a situation that they had, whether it was with school or at work? Maybe it was with a loved one, perhaps.
Yeah. Like a recent one for me where I was an outsider in a conflict was I was working on a film set one day, and the the COVID rules are really strict on film sets, which is really good, but there were a bunch of us doubles on that day. There was a lot of background, so we had our own wrangler, and a couple of the other girls had to get their makeup touched up, and then they turned around and took a sip of their drink, and somebody said something, so automatically they turned around and they didn't have their masks on. And at that moment, the background wrangler walked by and started yelling at them about not having their masks on. And it became like this really big thing. And it was really loud, and a lot of people heard it. And she said some pretty inappropriate things. And so I just kind of stayed back because I didn't want to like jump in and then end up making it worse. But the one girl, she tried to do like what I said, like she was trying to talk to the wrangler and explain what was happening, but then the wrangler wasn't letting her talk for the longest time. And eventually she jumped in and she got to say like how what she was saying made them feel, and that there was probably a nicer way to go about it. But yeah, it ended up being this really big thing. And then our wrangler had to get involved, which would be kind of like the manager in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up having to, well, they ended up having to write an email to HR, and I was on the email as a witness. So that was kind of how I ended up helping out in that situation. Like, I was there to support afterwards, and then I put my name in as a witness if they needed to talk to anybody who was on the outside of the conflict afterwards.
Yeah, you guys have had some interesting experiences. So, I like what you've both said here. These are really cool answers. I think these answers are going to be very, very useful. If I can just read out one example that I've put together of a response to how do you handle conflict, that would be, for example, during a conflict, I strive to listen to the other person's point of view without becoming defensive. I also attempt to move the confrontation to a private space to avoid further complications. So when you're thinking about things, going into an interview, going, okay, I know I have to answer this question. We have all been in conflict. Every single person has experienced conflict in their life, whether that's, someone didn't hold the door open for me and, I kind of got upset about it. Well, someone's not holding the door up for you and you're getting upset. That's conflict, right? It's conflict between what you want and what's happening. We experience conflict on a daily basis. And so I think with you guys and your beautiful brains coming at this with a completely different perspective, it's not easy.
No.
Again, with everything else with interviews, you got to prep for this stuff. You got to expect what questions are coming. And, if you can't, you can do some research and figure out what those are. Or you could listen to The Pulse and we'll help you answer those questions ourselves.
That does it for this week's episode of The Pulse. Tune in next week when we answer the question, what are your salary expectations? It's another tricky question that we want to help you navigate so you can figure out the best answer and that you won't get caught off guard. Thanks for listening.